Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Alan Moore's Photography. I am Alan, and today something entirely different. We're going to mix creative photography with dart photography and macro photography. So here's the deal. In addition to spending lots of time doing photography related stuff, I love to play darts. Learned how to play darts when I was a kid growing up in England, and have been playing darts ever since. These kind of darts, the ones with the metal points on them. And the weather out here it's gorgeous today, but it was horrendous over the last 2 days. So I was trying to think, what could I do if the weather stayed bad for a video this weekend? And I thought, well, let's do kind of a cross between a macro photography session and a product photography and some creative photography. So what I want to do is I want to photograph one of these darts as if it were in flight, as if it was zooming through the air. But I want something interesting as a kind of an element to draw your eye to the dart. So what I thought about was creating some fake smoke and having the dart coming through the smoke. So to do that, I've got a setup that hopefully will work, and we'll shoot some pictures, see what they look like. And if it looks like we're on the right track, we'll get a set of pictures and then take them over into Photoshop and see what we can come up with. Sound like a deal? All right, first things first, let me show you what the setup looks like. Before I get started explaining all of this stuff, I just want to mention that this video goes out to all the guys down at Jelly's Bar in Birmingham, Alabama. Great place to play darts. Anyhow, this is the dart photography session I was talking about. These big lights here are just so that so that you can basically see the equipment. Let me turn this LED thing on. There we go. That's a little bit better. Now you can see what's happening. So it's a very simple setup. We've got the camera. In this case, it's a full frame DSLR sitting on a tripod with a three-way, tripod head on it, and then a tripod that's all the way flattened out so it'll fit on the table. I tried a bunch of different things. I like to when I'm doing stuff like this, I like to keep the tripod on the same surface as what I'm shooting, so they don't move independent of one another. This is an Einstein 640 WS, a Paul C. Buff studio flash with an inexpensive flat softbox on it. And the idea is that we've got a tank of water. Now, I've got a fish tank and several other tanks that I use to photograph water stuff, but we're going to have to wash this thing out every single time I try to photograph the smoke. So I wanted something that was light and narrow, so it wouldn't hold too much water. But this really works quite well. So I've got a little tank of water positioned underneath the softbox in such a way that there we go. In such a way that the light is going to be coming in a little bit obliquely, a little from the front onto the water. Now I'm focused on the very front of the tank, and I'll explain why I'm doing that in just a second, but and I'll go into the camera settings. I've got a second light down here. It's just a studio light. It's set on the lowest possible power. Then my background is just a sheet of black foam board, and also behind that I have a sheet of white foam board, and I'm going to try the photograph with both backgrounds. Later on, after we do the water stuff, I'm going to use this nifty gadget here. It's for soldering things together. It holds circuit boards so that you can do that. But I'm going to use it to hold darts. Because of the number of arms, I can hold one end of the dart, then the other end of the dart. Makes it much easier to cut the dart out in Photoshop. You'll see what I mean. So that's really about it. You'll notice I have a remote. Definitely want a remote when you're doing this, because I'm going to have to be over here by the water. Hang on, there we go. I'm going to be over here squirting water into this while I'm trying to operate the camera. So everything's in manual, and I'm pre-focused, and the autofocus is turned off. Okay, so let's take a look at the camera. I'll get the lights turned on and we'll talk a little bit about the settings. So let's walk through the camera settings. They're all pretty basic. Let me see. We're going to use a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. That's because that's the sync speed for the flash that I'm using. You'll notice that the f-stop is set really high. I'm setting it to 11 just so that we can get enough depth of field. We're pretty far back from the tank. I want to make sure that we've got enough depth of field to get most of the cloud in pretty decent focus. I normally, when I'm using flash, I'll set the ISO to 100 and see if I need to do any exposure adjustment after that. Now, I usually use radio triggers, but I've been having a little bit of problem with the triggers that I use with this camera. So what I'm actually using is the, if I can show it to you there, the PC sync right here. And I'm syncing directly to the Paul C. Buff flash. So I've got a wired connection, pretty much guarantees I'm going to get the flash just when I want it. I've turned the autofocus and turn the vibration control off. Never want to leave that on, by the way. If you're taking pictures on a tripod, it'll mess with your picture. The other flash is set at 1/128th power. They're both of the flashes are set as low as I can get them. And that's kind of why with this very, very small aperture and using the flash, I'm not worried about all of this ambient light in the room, because I think the flash is going to get rid of all of that. So what I usually will do is just start by taking a couple of test shots with nothing else going on, just to see what backgrounds look like and see how much exposure we're getting in the water and see if we've got any reflections, that type of thing. So we'll do that now. So what I've done here is I've put a skinny wooden toothpick at the front of the tank, and I'm going to use that as a focus line. I'm going to be putting the smoke in the tank towards the front of the tank. So that's where I want the camera to be in focus. Remember, I'm using a macro lens, a Tamron 90mm f2.8 that I got closed down all the way to f11. But I'm still only going to have a very narrow depth of field. Obviously, where I want the sharpest focus is going to be right in front of the dart. So what I'm going to do is I'm focused now on the toothpick. I'll take a test shot. All right, excellent. I can see, as I'm sure you can too, from the image, that I'm going to need to bump up the power quite a bit. So I'm going to mess around with the light settings for just a second, and then I'll talk to you about the smoke. Okay, so what I ended up having to do was get the power on the main flash up to about 50%, which is a lot more than I thought I'd need to get it to. And I've also bumped up the power on the backlighting to about a quarter power. And it's giving me some decent light. I think we'll be able to fiddle with a lot of that in post. But for now, I think the picture we're getting is about what I want. I'm thinking it may actually be better with the white background, but I'm also going to change my white balance. I've got it set on the flash that I normally use, but let me try something different here. It's okay. I'm gonna put the white background on. Then I'm gonna turn off some of these other lights. They're not really bothering the picture, but they're bothering me. And then I'll talk about the smoke. So obviously, the smoke that I'm going to use can't be smoke. I'm using a tank of clean, fresh water. And what I've done is, you can buy this acrylic paint. I think it's acrylic. It's waterproof, I mean water-based. Anyway, you can buy it at Walmart, I think, is the place I got it from. It's like $1 for a bottle. And then they've got these little bottles that are 50 cents. So I've got hundreds of them. I got one of every color they had. And so I could experiment. I do this kind of thing a fair amount. It's fun to do, and I use some of the effects I get in my product photography. But anyway, what I'm going to do today, I had a hard time matching the color of the yellows in these darts, so I'm going to have to end up doing some of that in post-production. But what I did was I mixed up a mixture of, this one's yellow, about 90% yellow and 5% orange, and some other color I put in there. And it's getting close to what I want. And then just for fun, I made some red stuff up because it's Halloween and this will be bloody. I always confuse Halloween and Thanksgiving because they're the 2 days of the year that I have to leave my house. One of them so that my kids won't find me, and the other one so that other people's kids won't find me. But either way, once I get done with this, I'm hitting the road. Leave a bag of revolting sweeties on the doorstep for the little ragamuffins when they come by. Anyway, let's get on with this. It's getting on. So we got everything set up. I am going to take a batch of my mixed up yellow smoke, and we'll shoot a test shot, see what it looks like. By the way, the reason I set this up last night using continuous light, using a couple of LED panels. Light was not the problem, but even with that amount of light, I couldn't get either the depth of field, and I couldn't freeze the smoke the way I wanted to. It was kind of getting a bit blurry around the edges. I tried a lot of different things, but the issue is you have to be able to use a fast enough shutter speed and a small enough aperture to get the depth that you want. And by the time you've got the settings the way you want them, you really have no choice but to use a strobe or speed lights. You can do it very easily with speed lights. I just don't trust speed lights to recycle quickly enough. Sometimes when I put the smoke in to the water, I'll want to get more than one shot, even though it's almost always the first shot that I use. What I'm going to do is, seeing as I'm going to have the dart angled probably slightly up coming towards me, I think I want the ink to be going the other way so that the dart, I can Photoshop the dart as if it's coming through the ink. That's the plan anyway. So for that purpose, I am going to squirt the dye in from the left-hand side of the table from the camera's viewpoint, and we'll see what that looks like. So let's do a couple of shots and see what we get. Well, I think the pictures are looking great, coming along nicely. There's a couple of pointers I'd give you, a couple of tips I forgot to mention earlier. Number one, no matter what kind of camera you're using, have at least a couple of extra batteries. You'll go through a ton of batteries doing this because you're leaving live view on, and it just eats through a lot of power. Number two, this little fish tank thing that I'm using is just a little plastic thing for, I think Walmart sells it for kids to kill little fish in. Not quite sure why, but it was only $4 or $4.25 or something. So I wish I'd bought 3 of them instead of 1, because it is a pain in the butt to have to squirt some color in there, take one picture, and then go wash it out again. But such as, at least it's not my big fish tank that takes half an hour to fill. Okay, so I'm gonna keep taking some pictures till I get the ones that are just right. By the way, if you buy these squeezy bottles, I got these for $1.50 for 3 of them from Harbor Freight, I think. It was one of those hardware shops, but it's a great deal. Problem is though, the hole in the top is too small. As you could see from that first image, it kind of squirts in and immediately breaks up. I've cut the tip off of the yellow one so that it'll flow in more in a larger stream, so you get that roiling effect, and that's what I'm looking for. So let's try a couple more. I made a few changes, by the way. I brought the light down a little bit more in front of the container, and I focused a little bit deeper into the water, and I switched to the white background. We're getting there slowly but surely. Let's see what this one looks like. Running out of yellow paint though. Oh yeah, pretty happy with that. Now that's well in focus, and there's plenty of those pieces of cloud that I'll be able to use. I guess I won't really know till I get them in Photoshop, but I think I have several decent looking shots there. It took a while to get the lighting just right, and I was messing around with the colors a bit and got the paint a bit too thick a few times. Yeah, we'll just see what it looks like. I can always adjust the color a little bit in Photoshop, but I can't adjust the shape or the focus. So hopefully we got those close enough to right. Now we're going to photograph the darts. The important thing is that when we photograph the darts, we need to use the same exact lighting setup. We don't want to move anything. Make sure everything's square, and then we'll position it in these little grabber things that I've got. We'll try to get it lined up. Get it focused. We'll do a couple of test shots and see what it looks like. So I'm guessing this is going to be about right. And if I secure the tip there, I can I'm trying to keep the whole thing on a plane so that the entire dart is in focus. It's a little bit too far forward. That should be about right. Yeah, that shows everything on the flight too. Okay, let me see what that looks like through the camera. Okay, so I got zoomed in nice and tight. Without the zoom, I think that the dart's largely in frame. We're going to be cutting it out in Photoshop anyway to reposition it. But let's do a test shot, see what that looks like. If I can find my remote. Nice. I think we could use, I think the glow in the background is, I'm using a grid to try to tighten that up some. I might, well, I don't want to change the background too much. Let me leave the background light where it is and bump up the foreground just a bit. All right, let's try that. Much better. Now, what I've done here is I've left the dart exactly where it was and just replaced the gripper at the point just with the one gripper in the middle so that I can easily get rid of the other two in Photoshop. There's just one thing I don't like about the dart, and that is the bottom of the dart is too shady. I've got a white card underneath it, but I'm actually going to try bouncing a little bit of flash back up into it with a little mirror and see if I can get a little bit more light on the underside. We'll see what that looks like. So using the modeling light, I can see exactly where I want a little bit of extra light underneath. So let me try that. Oh, that's much better. That's exactly the way I wanted the edges at the bottom of the dart to light up. So let's take all of these photographs and go back to Lightroom and Photoshop, see if we can make a photograph out of this. All right, guys, out of all of the pictures that I took, this was actually the one I decided to use, mainly because the flight was in just the right position. I could see it was going to need quite a bit of work to get it cleaned up, but no problem. This was the dart I was going to use, and then of the smoke shots was this one. Now you'll notice that I flipped the image upside down. This was the way I took it, squirting the ink in from the top, but given the way I want this composition to look, it was a lot easier to work with it upside down. I'm also going to bring in two of these other dart images just so that I can show you how to replace a point so that you can have a dart that's floating in midair. I used a different technique to get rid of this for this dart because I didn't have one clamped down here. So I'll show you what I mean. So we'll click on all four of the images, right click, go to Edit in Photoshop. I'm going to open these as separate images. I'm not going to open them as layers, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so this is the dart, let's say, that you wanted to use. The first thing you're going to want to do is get rid of this foreign object, and that's why we took a second dart photograph right here, where this area of the dart isn't being held by a clamp. Now, these aren't the pictures we're using. I'm just using these to show you how I would do this. So I'll take this dart, select move, grab the dart, drop it on top of the other layer, like so. Now I will create a copy of the background, Command J. Okay, so what we need to do, we can turn off the background layer and let's line them up. Now, because the perspective is different, we couldn't use auto align. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do it manually. Go to the top layer, reduce the opacity by about 50%, and the underlying layer will show up. Now we can just free transform the top layer. So the first thing we can do is we can rotate dart 1 until it lines up with the part we're looking for. That actually looks pretty good right there, because we're only interested in this part here.
and both darts appear to be well aligned there. So the next step, with dart 1 highlighted, we're going to create a mask. Click on the mask. Now take a black brush, click on the brush tool or hit B. Make sure black is your foreground color, and we're going to mask out the part of this photograph that we don't want, which is basically this. And because we have the image lined up underneath, when we paint with black, it's only going to remove the clamp, like so. So that's really all there is to that. Now, use whatever selection tool you want. If you've got plenty of time, use the pen tool and get a very accurate selection. I'm just going to use the quick select tool for this demonstration. Okay, that looks like I've got everything done. It's always a good idea to now select and mask. By going into select and mask, it allows you to use the refine edge tool, for example. Which can help ensure that you've got mask just where you want it and nowhere else. So I'll usually brush over the edges, especially if I see any of the mask impinging on the dart. And when you're done, just hit OK. So now you have the dart completely selected in the original image, and all you have to do to create a new layer with just the dart on it is hit Command J, make a new copy, and you will end up with this. At this point, before we start doing the compositing, is when you would want to go in and work your way all the way around the dart and clean up any messes. All of this can be corrected with your spot healing brush or whatever tool you like to use. Spot healing will work for some of these areas. You just click on them and it'll content aware fill, and it's just a matter of going around the whole thing. I am not going to make you sit through this. So let's go to our smoke. First thing, let's get rid of the background. So this is another simple quick select option, and you'll see why we're doing this in a minute, because we're going to replace the background completely. So just select the whole thing like that, and don't worry if it's not precise, because we're going to be doing some things to smooth up the edges later. So with the ink selected, just hit Command J to make a copy without the background. If you turn off the background, you can see it. So that's all we need. So here's our dart layer, all cleaned up and removed from the background. Background is turned off, so it's on a transparency here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and on that layer I'm going to use the gradient tool. Click on the gradient tool, and then I'm going to select a radial gradient. You could do a linear gradient. I tried it. It's just not as cool looking as the radial. And then if you click to edit the gradient, you can set it up any way you want. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details of using the gradient tool right now, but if you do what I'm doing here, you'll be fine. So this is a custom gradient that I'm using. By clicking on color, it allows me to change the color around. And so once you have the color the way you want it, this is going to be the color at the center of your gradient. This is going to be the color at the outside edges of the gradient. And this little triangular box here is going to move the midpoint. So you can have a very small orange ball of light in the middle, or you can have a very large glow of the orange all around the subject. We'll leave it about midway, see how that looks. And the gradient type we're using is the radial type that we clicked on earlier, and just click OK. And then pick your point. Now, when I first did this, I tried putting the gradient right in the middle. Of course, you're going to have to move that layer underneath the dart. And I thought that was pretty cool, but I decided after experimenting with it that it looked better if the gradient, let's make another new layer and select gradient, and I left all the colors the way they were, but I moved the center of the gradient back towards the flight, like so. And you'll see why this works better, I think. Now all we're missing is our clouds that we made. So let's go to the cloud section where we have cut the clouds out and have the the billowing ink isolated on a transparent background. So if we just grab our move tool, we can grab the clouds, drag them onto our dart, and there you go. Now, this is the time at which I would move it around. Now, there's multiple different ways you could set this up. It's really whatever appeals to you. I did something like this, which would be fine. We can enlarge it just a little bit. I liked it when the clouds were all the way to the edges of the frame, like so. Something like that would work. I'll tell you what though, I'm gonna enlarge it a little bit more. Be careful that you don't enlarge it too much or you'll start to lose resolution. But I'm going to tuck it into that hole. You'll see why in just a second. Okay, perfect. So we have the dart on top, and we have the next layer down is your clouds, and then the gradient is below that. So you can see it looks like there's something explosive going on back here, and that the dart is shooting out of all of that mayhem. So what we're going to do is, what I would like to do is have some of the clouds overlapping the back part of the flight. So the way we can do that is to go to the dart layer and add a mask. It's white, so everything's showing through. And then if we just take a brush, B for brush, black for the foreground color, because that will block parts of the dart, what we can do is we can make your brush a little bit bigger. I use I'm going to use a hard brush to start, and then I'm going to switch to a soft brush to feather everything. But I can see roughly, if you want, you can lower the opacity of the dart so that you can see the parts of the clouds that you want to show through. And then just using your black brush, you can just paint those parts in. There's a part there that looks good. And of course, do this carefully. Take your time. This is the artistic part of it. And I shouldn't cover up the name like that, but I'm just doing this to show you the point. So now we've put some of the ink into the foreground by creating this mask on the dart. All right, now we can turn the dart back up to full opacity, and you can see how we've given the illusion that the dart now is coming out of the the clouds, if you will. And that's really all there is to it. There's a lot of stuff you can do to clean this up. So one thing that you can do is click on your ink layer and grab the blur tool. If you carefully just blur the edges, it makes that glow around them seem a lot more believable. So that is about it. That's all that you have to do to create these artistic composite images. And the sky's the limit. You can be as creative with this as you want. And as you can see, this gives you an opportunity to use all kinds of different backgrounds, you know, real smoke or anything that you can dream up. You can use Photoshop to layer them together and create some pretty impressive images. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed doing it. It was way better than going out and photographing rain falling. But anyway, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll help you as much as I can. And if you have any ideas about what you'd like to see next on YouTube, please let me know. I'm always up for a challenge, and I love doing different stuff. So let me know if you have any ideas. If there's anything I can help you with from this or any of the other videos, please let me know. Thank you for everybody who watches and subscribes to the channel. I really appreciate having you out there. I wouldn't do these videos if it wasn't for you. The weather is now finally nice after a couple of days of miserable rain, so I am going to go out with a camera and do something outdoorsy today. But thank you again for watching. Hope you had as much fun as I did, and I'll see you in a few days with something else. Run over to the website if you want, alanwallsphotography.com. Added some new pictures, and there's some other stuff over there that's new you might want to look at. Okay, I'll talk to you again in a few days. Until then, adios.